My name is Captain Danica Merrill, 29 years old, U.S. Army Logistics. At Brim Airfield, Afghanistan, dust and mortality were constants, until a satellite call from home cut deeper than any enemy fire. "Danny," my stepfather laughed, "I just sold your father's cabin." He didn't know. Soldiers don't surrender assets, they secure them. If you've ever seen someone underestimate the wrong person, hit like, subscribe, and tell me, what would you have done? The rotor wash from an incoming Black Hawk kicked a storm of dust across the compound. Out here at Brim Airfield, Afghanistan, the wind never stopped moving. It carried grit, exhaustion, and the quiet hum of survival. I was sitting in the small tactical operations hut, logging maintenance reports, when the satellite phone on my desk began to blink. Few things made that light flash. Fewer still made my stomach drop the way this one did. The caller ID read Richard, home. I took a breath before answering. "Captain Merrill," I said, instinctively using rank before name. "Danny." His voice came through with that false cheer that always meant trouble. "Great news. I just sold your father's cabin." For a moment, the background noise, the clatter of tools, distant rotors fell away. My pen stilled midair. "You what?" He laughed. "Don't sound so shocked. The market's good and the money's clearing a few debts. Plus, Chloe's finally getting that Europe trip she's been begging for. Think of it as reallocating assets." My hand tightened on the receiver until my knuckles went white. I could picture his smirk from 7,000 miles away. "That cabin," I said quietly, "isn't yours to sell." "Oh, come on," he scoffed. "It was just sitting there collecting dust. Kinda poetic, huh? Dust runs in the family." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Around me, the generator hummed. A fly circled the map pinned to the plywood wall. I stared at the satellite phone, hearing my heartbeat in my ears. He thought distance made me powerless. He thought the chain of command that ruled my life ended at his front door. I forced air into my lungs, the way they'd trained us to when panic crept in. 4 seconds inhale, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Tactical breathing. The heat, the noise, the rising anger. They all fell into rhythm. My mind cleared. "You'll send me the contract," I said, voice steady now. "The buyer's name, the broker's license number." He chuckled again. "Oh, I knew you'd make this complicated. Relax, Captain. I handled it. Enjoy your little deployment. Real adults will take care of the home front." The line clicked dead. For a long moment, I just sat there, the static fading into silence. My reflection in the dusty laptop screen looked alien, eyes too sharp, jaw locked. Then instinct took over. I opened my encrypted email client and typed the subject line automatically, fingers moving faster than thought. Subject: Situation Redcon 1 at Stronghold Pine. Body: Hostile transfer attempt. Confirm integrity of Clause 17C. Request legal interdiction. Awaiting coordinates. DM, I hit send. The coded message would go to one person, Laura Jensen, civilian attorney, former ROTC cadet, and the one person who had helped me secure Dad's cabin years ago. We'd called it Stronghold Pine. A joke then, a lifeline now. I leaned back in the metal chair, the frame groaning under my weight. My tongue tasted like dust and copper. Outside, the sun sank behind the HESCO barriers, turning the airfield gold. The war outside the wire had rules, uniforms, Geneva Conventions. The one waiting back home wouldn't. I stood and crossed to the small latrine, the air thick with disinfectant and sand. I splashed cold water on my face, staring into the polished steel mirror. My eyes were steady again. There was no shaking, no shouting, no collapse. My father had taught me that a soldier's first weapon was composure. "All right," I whispered to the reflection. "If you want to fight, you'll get one. But we do this by the book." Outside, a convoy rumbled toward the gate. I straightened my posture, tucked the satellite phone into my chest pocket, and stepped back into the Afghan night. The war I'd trained for was out there. The one that mattered most had just begun, 7,000 miles away in the heart of Colorado. The next night, as the desert cooled and the air settled into a silence that hummed in my ears, sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling back to one thing, the way he'd laughed. It wasn't new. That laugh had a history. It had first echoed in our house years ago, long before I wore a uniform. Thanksgiving, Colorado Springs, age 18. The smell of roast turkey, sage, and bourbon had filled every inch of the house. I still remember the faint glint of silverware reflecting the chandelier light, the low hum of polite family chatter, a room pretending to be happy. I'd just gotten my acceptance letter to West Point. My whole future, every dream my father and I had talked about, was suddenly real. I thought the night would be a celebration. Instead, it was the first lesson in humiliation. Richard sat at the head of the long table, crystal glass in hand, my mother beside him, smiling that thin, careful smile she always wore when she was walking a minefield. He cleared his throat and raised the glass. "A toast," he said, "to Danica, our brave little soldier." Everyone turned. I could feel their eyes, the half-smiles, the curiosity. I straightened in my chair. He continued, "Who's decided to trade a world-class education for a few years learning how to salute?" He paused, letting the words sink in, then added, "But at least she'll look good in uniform." Laughter scattered around the table. Brittle, awkward, the kind that fills a room when nobody's sure if it's safe not to laugh. My mother looked down at her plate, pretending to cut her turkey. I stared at her, silently begging her to stop him, to say something. She didn't. That silence hit harder than his words ever could. It was the sound of a line being drawn. The moment I realized I'd have to defend myself alone. I remember pushing food around my plate, the taste gone from everything. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I didn't even touch the pumpkin pie. Later that night, he handed my stepsister Chloe a Tiffany box. "For my princess," he said, watching her squeal as she held up a silver necklace. Then he reached into his pocket and slid an envelope across the table toward me. "Here you go, Danny. Something practical." Inside was a $50 bill. "Buy yourself some thick socks," he said, grinning over his bourbon. "Winters in New York are brutal." The humiliation burned hotter than the fireplace behind me. I excused myself and left the room before the tears could fall. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of my bed, fists clenched, staring at my acceptance letter lying on the nightstand. I wanted to rip it apart. Not because I didn't want it, but because I hated that moment being attached to him. Then came a knock at the door. Slow, soft. It was my uncle, my dad's brother, a quiet man who'd served in Vietnam. He didn't say much. He just handed me a small leather-bound book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed. "The greatest generals read it," he said, his voice raspy. "Teaches you how to make your mind a fortress. Don't let the little people breach the walls." He gave my shoulder a firm squeeze and left. No lectures. No pity. Just strength. Quiet and sure. That night, I sat by the window, the cold moonlight spilling over the book in my lap. I flipped to a page he'd marked. The passage read, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." I didn't know it then, but that would become my code. Back in Afghanistan, I sat on my cot under the faint hum of a fluorescent bulb, that same book now sitting beside my rifle and ration kit. Its edges were frayed, the spine cracked from years of use. That Thanksgiving had been the first battle, a war not of weapons, but of dignity. And now, years later, the enemy hadn't changed. Same smirk, same laugh. Only this time, I wasn't the unarmed girl at the table. This time, I had rank, protocol, and purpose. The past had taught me where the weak points were. And now, I was ready to strike precisely where it hurt most, within the rules, by the book, and without a single wasted word. The first rule of any operation is secure your comms. The second is know your objective. I closed the latrine door behind me and set up at my station. Encrypted laptop, headset, the little blue light on the satellite phone like a heartbeat against my chest. I opened the secure channel to Laura Jensen before I let my anger breathe. There was no room for theatrics, only facts, timelines, and proof. "Laura," I said when she answered, my voice as flat and steady as a drill brief. "Situation Redcon 1 at Stronghold Pine. Hostile transfer attempt. Clause 17C. Wet signatures required before a registered notary. Do you have access to the Steel Covenant files?" "On it," she said, the sound of her fingers already on a keyboard. "Give me everything you have. Broker name, buyer, escrow number, any emails. If you tried to open escrow without both grantors present, it's void on its face." I sent her what I had. A screenshot of the agent's online listing with the MLS entry timestamped, the agent's contact number, a forwarded message from the broker's email header showing a preliminary escrow open time. I attached the scanned copy of the co-ownership addendum we'd drafted years ago, the document Dad insisted we notarize, the one Laura had called the Steel Covenant. Clause 17C was plain and surgical. No sale, transfer, lease, or encumbrance shall be valid without physical presence of both co-owners before a registered notary and witnessed by legal counsel. Electronic signatures shall be invalid for conveyance of the stronghold. Laura read the clause and whistled softly. "He walked onto a legal minefield," she said. "I'll draft a cease and desist and a standstill demand to the broker and escrow right now. I'll also put the buyer and their lender on notice. Material misrepresentation kills deals faster than anything." "Flag the lender," I said. "If they fund against a defect, we'll have a separate route to freeze the transaction." The Service Members Civil Relief Act sometimes helps in these situations when a service member's rights are at stake, but this was primarily fraud and misrepresentation, a different tool set. I didn't throw the SCRA around unless it worked in our favor. Law is a toolbox, not a sermon. Copy. I'll ping the MLS admin, file an ethics complaint with the state board, and get a certified demand packet out via courier. Also, she paused, the voice softening the smallest degree. "Do you want me to file a criminal referral if the documents look forged?" "Yes," I said. "Preserve chain of custody. Timestamp everything. If there's a forged signature, I want a trace to the notary or the falsified document path. Get me title history, preliminary reports, and any recorded affidavits immediately. And Laura, get me the agent's call log. If he claimed Richard was sole owner, I want that admission on record." "Already working on it. You take care of yourself over there. Get your leave cleared and come home in uniform. Presence matters." I swallowed and typed the final line. "Requesting emergency leave. Will advise ETA." Clicking send felt like stepping off a ledge, but it was the right ledge. On the legal side, we were moving in pieces. Containment first, then exposure, then escalation. Procedure would be our weapon. Precision our ammunition. Next, I rang Sarge Peterson. He picked up on the first ring, his voice gravelly and immediate. "Merrill, you sound like you've been slapped by a sandstorm." "Richard Stone sold the cabin," I said. I didn't waste words with dramatics. Sarge didn't need them. "You coming home?" he asked. "Requesting emergency leave?" I replied. "I'm on it." "Good. Bring whatever proof you can and don't let him see you sweat. We'll get the old boys together. Character witnesses. Your father's world isn't a rumor out here. It's got witnesses." By the time I hit the final keys to request leave through the chain of command, Laura had already handed me a preliminary timeline. MLS listing opened at 0902. Escrow account created at 0927. Broker's email confirming seller claims authority at 0934. She sent a PDF of the drafted demand letter ready to be dispatched, and a memo requesting preservation of all related communications. I sat back and let the moment settle. There was a sterile beauty to it, a plan forming, networks engaging, systems answering. Out here you learned that the machinery of institutions could be slow, but it was relentless if you fed it facts. I closed my laptop, checked my uniform, and signed the leave form with the same calm precision I used in a briefing room. Composure secured. Channels established. Mission objective clear. 7,000 miles didn't feel like much anymore. The flight home was a blur of noise and silence. 40 hours, 3 layovers, and 1 emergency leave authorization later. I was standing in the cold Colorado air outside my small apartment. My duffel bag still smelled of jet fuel and desert sand. I hadn't even changed out of uniform. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of weather that seemed to hold its breath before a storm. I wasn't surprised to see the black BMW already parked in my driveway. Polished, smug, like the man leaning against it. Richard. He spotted me and straightened, arms crossed, expression rehearsed. "We need to talk," he said, tone halfway between authority and guilt. I didn't answer. I walked past him, unlocked my door, and stepped inside. He followed without being invited. Typical. My living room was small, plain. 1 worn sofa, 1 coffee table, a wall lined with old photos, and my father's framed flag. I set my duffel down quietly, removed my cover, and turned to face him. The silence between us thickened. "Nice place," he said, looking around. "Guess combat pay does all right. Meanwhile, back home, your mother and I are drowning in bills. That cabin sale was necessary." I didn't move. I just met his eyes. Silence has a power most people underestimate. In the Army, we call it command presence, the art of owning a room without saying a word. He faltered first. "Don't look at me like that, Danica. I did what I had to. Your father left debts, responsibilities, things you wouldn't understand." "Really?" I said. My voice was low, controlled. "Explain how that requires forging a co-owner's signature." His jaw tightened. "I didn't forge anything. I have the papers." "Let's talk about those papers," I said. I moved to the small desk near the window and powered up my laptop. The screen's glow filled the room with a sterile light. "Clause 17C, the Pine Stronghold Addendum, remember it?" He frowned. "The what?" I opened the folder labeled Steel Covenant and turned the screen toward him. "The clause that says no property transfer, lease, or sale is valid without both signers present before a registered notary. You never met that condition, which makes your sale null, void, and legally fraudulent." His face went pale, then red. "You think you can intimidate me with your military mumbo-jumbo? That cabin's been my responsibility for years. You're out here playing soldier while I keep things afloat." I clicked to the next file. A recorded call transcript glowed on the screen. A statement from the real estate agent Laura had contacted the previous night. Agent: "Mr. Stone assured me he was the sole owner. If I'd known otherwise, I would have refused the listing." Laura: "And he signed your agreement claiming full authority?" Agent: "Yes, that's correct." I stopped the playback. His eyes flicked toward the door. Flight instinct. But I stepped closer, keeping my tone level. "You impersonated a sole owner. You misled a licensed broker. You attempted to liquidate a protected military family asset under false pretenses. That's not family business, Richard. That's fraud." "Watch your tone," he snapped. "You're talking to—" "No," I interrupted, stepping forward. "I'm talking to a man who thought I wouldn't notice." The tension snapped like a wire. He started pacing. "Look, maybe some paperwork wasn't perfect, but you can't just throw me in jail. It's family." I leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Here are your options." I checked my watch, deliberately. Option 1, you call the buyer and the broker right now, cancel the sale, and email confirmation to my attorney by 0900. Option 2, at 0901, the district attorney receives a criminal complaint for fraud and forgery. I won't have to raise my voice. The law will do it for me. He stared at me like he didn't recognize the person standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. The quiet daughter who once begged for approval was gone. What stood before him was a soldier in full control of the battlefield. And this living room was now the field. "You wouldn't dare," he whispered. "Try me," I said. For a moment, I saw the flicker of something. Maybe fear, maybe realization. He grabbed his coat, muttering curses under his breath. "You're destroying this family." "No," I said softly. "I'm protecting what's left of it." He slammed the door hard enough to shake the frame. I didn't move. I waited until the sound of his engine faded down the street, then exhaled slowly. My pulse had stayed steady the whole time. I closed the laptop and stared at the reflection of my father's folded flag in the darkened window. He'd always said, "You don't need to raise your voice when the truth is louder." Tomorrow at 0900, the clock would start ticking. Whether Richard kept his word or not, this war had officially entered its next phase. And this time, I wasn't fighting alone. They always say the worst thing a liar can do is bring others into their lie. Richard didn't disappoint. Within hours of leaving my apartment, my phone pinged with the first salvo. A long, rambling post from Chloe. It was the kind of public performance built from half-truths and curated photos, smiling faces at Christmas, captions about family hardship, and a thinly veiled plea for sympathy. She painted me as the cold, heartless officer trying to take away her childhood home. My mother's comment was worse for its casual neutrality. "I just wish my daughters could find a way to get along." That single line did the work of 1,000 defenders. It reframed the story into a simple family, spat for anyone scrolling by. The digital mob assembled in minutes. Calls, messages, accusations. People who'd never met me were suddenly experts on family dynamics. Laura didn't flinch when I sent screenshots. She cataloged them like evidence. Timestamps, URLs, comment threads. Exhibit K, she called it. Character and motive in plain view. She bundled Chloe's public post, my mother's comment, and the stream of angry replies into a single PDF marked and labeled. "This shows intent," she said. "It shows they're manufacturing a narrative to cover a fraudulent conveyance. The buyer needs to see this." Laura sent that packet directly to the buyer's counsel and the lender. Her email was surgical. A concise explanation of material misrepresentation, the risk to the buyer's title insurance, and the attached public smear campaign designed to distract from the wrongdoing. Within hours, I got a terse reply from the buyer's attorney. "We are withdrawing our offer until further notice. Please confirm the transaction is frozen." The sound of that withdrawal was like a bullet finding its mark. Meanwhile, the broker's office called. They were quiet. Embarrassed. Defensive. An internal compliance investigation had been opened. The agent who'd listed the cabin was put on administrative leave pending an audit of his file. Laura also lodged a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Board and sent a preservation demand to the MLS administrator. Every line of communication mattered. Every logged email, every recorded phone call was another chain link to hold against their story. Then the situation crossed from paper to peril. At 02:17 in the morning, there was a frantic pounding on my front door. Someone hammered like a man trying to break wood with rage. I didn't move at first. Training teaches you to assess before you act. I watched from the peephole as a silhouette staggered under a street lamp. Richard, drunk and red-faced, shouting my name. Neighbors came to their windows. Someone called 911. I could hear the dispatcher through the wall because the neighbor's voice carried. "Yes, we've got a disturbance at 4B. Male is banging on the door and yelling threats." Within minutes, the blue and red strobes painted the walls of my living room. The officers arrived and spoke in measured tones, the kind that diffuse and de-escalate. Richard shoved at one of them, belligerent, staggering, liquor on his breath. That's when everything changed. The shove was a crime. The officers reacted and restrained him. I watched them read his rights through the peephole. Succinct, unavoidable. The metallic click of the cuffs was a noise I'll remember longer than any shout. Later, after he'd been processed, I received the incident report number and a link to the preliminary police statement. Chief among the entries was the officer's observation of public intoxication and the assault on an officer. The report included timestamps, the responding patrol car numbers, and the dispatch audio file. Laura printed the report and labeled it Exhibit P for police. "This is beyond family drama now," she said when we reviewed it. "You've got criminal behavior tied to the fraudulent transaction. That's motive, opportunity, and action." Within 48 hours, the Denver Economic Crimes Unit had opened a preliminary inquiry. Detective Miller called me directly, and his voice carried the tired authority of someone who'd seen these family-turned-financial crimes before. "Captain Merrill," he said, "we've received a comprehensive packet from your attorney. We're classifying this as a potential felony fraud. We need originals, witnesses, and cooperation." He asked for the chain of custody on every document Laura had forwarded and for corroborating testimony from any character witnesses who could speak to your father's intent for the cabin. Sarge Peterson answered that call without hesitation. He emailed a sworn affidavit recounting conversations with my father about the property. He typed memories into a file and notarized them. Other veterans who had known my father reached out to give accounts. Quiet, unequivocal. The kind of testimony that couldn't be manufactured in a single night. Richard's camp tried to fight in the court of public opinion. We fought back with evidentiary packets, timestamps, sworn affidavits, and formal complaints. They threw noise. We replied with process. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't cinematic in the way some people imagine justice. It was paperwork, patience, and persistence. But it was effective. By the time the buyer's counsel confirmed withdrawal and the broker's firm put their agent under inquiry, the house of cards Richard had built was wobbling. The next move belonged to the investigators now. The war had shifted from living room ultimatums to legal sieges. And for the first time since that satellite phone call, I felt the tide turn in my favor. The cabin had always been more than timber and stone to me, but I didn't realize just how much until Sarge Peterson showed up at my door 2 mornings later. He didn't knock twice, just once, the way soldiers do when they don't waste time waiting for permission. When I opened the door, he stood there in his old denim jacket, the one with the faded Marine Corps patch half torn at the seam. In his hands, he carried a small olive-drab footlocker, edges rusted, latch stiff with age. "Your father left this with me before his last deployment," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Told me to keep it safe until you really needed it." He looked me straight in the eye. "I think now's that time." He set the box down gently on my coffee table. The sound of metal on wood felt like the closing of a chapter. I swallowed hard, thanked him, and waited until he left before I reached for the latches. They creaked like something ancient waking up. Inside, the smell of gun oil and old paper hit me first, the scent of time and memory. There were photos, my father in uniform, me as a toddler on his shoulders in front of the half-built cabin, both of us grinning like fools. There were medals, insignias, a compass, and finally, a thick cream envelope sealed with wax. My name was written across it in his unmistakable handwriting. For a moment, I just held it. My throat tightened, my pulse slow and heavy in my chest. Then I broke the seal. The letter wasn't long, but every line was measured, like he'd written it knowing one day I'd need it not for comfort, but for clarity. He wrote about the cabin, calling it our stronghold of peace, a place meant to protect what mattered most when the world got loud. And then the words that changed everything. "To ensure no one can ever take it from you, I've arranged a life estate for your mother. But full and final ownership, absolute and undivided, is yours. The documents are filed with Granton and Kellerman, Denver. My attorney holds the originals." I read it twice, then 3 more times. The truth striking with surgical precision. He hadn't just left me a home. He'd built a legal fortress around it. Richard hadn't sold a cabin. He'd attempted to breach a defense my father had constructed long before he died. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of vindication. I scanned the letter carefully, uploaded a copy into my encrypted drive, and sent it to Laura with a short message. Subject: confirmed. This is the firewall. Proceed. She called within minutes. "Danny," she said, her voice a mix of awe and fury. That's not a smoking gun. That's a nuclear deterrent. The life estate clause blocks any conveyance attempt. If this letter matches the law firm's copy, Richard committed felony-level concealment and fraud. I want it verified, I said. Already on it. I'll get a handwriting expert for authentication and subpoena the original will from Granton and Kellerman. We'll have confirmation within 24 hours. True to her word, she did. The scan came back with a forensic report. Signature verified. The firm responded by email. Provision confirmed. Life estate exists for Carol Stone only. Absolute ownership vests in Captain Danica Merrill. That was it. The legal line had been drawn in indelible ink. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter in front of me, the morning light creeping across the paper. For the first time in weeks, the air felt breathable. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was honoring procedure, my father's, mine, and the truth's. When I called Laura back, her voice carried the satisfaction of a closing argument. The war's almost over, Captain. All that's left is the surrender. I glanced down at my father's neat handwriting. Strong, precise, patient. Then let's end it, I said quietly. By the book. Tomorrow, the district attorney would host mediation. Richard would walk into that room thinking it was negotiation. He had no idea he was already standing in his own verdict. The mediation was held in a quiet conference room at the Jefferson County Courthouse. No judge's gavel, no jury, just a long oak table, neutral walls, and a clock that ticked like a metronome marking the end of chaos. Laura sat beside me, her notes stacked in perfect order. Across from us sat Richard, his suit a size too sharp for his posture. My mother was next to him, smaller than I remembered, her eyes darting between us as if searching for some exit that wasn't on the map. At the head of the table was Assistant District Attorney Davies. Gray suit, measured voice, no wasted motion. We are here to resolve a case of attempted property transfer under false representation. She began. Let's proceed with a timeline summary. Laura spoke like a surgeon, precise, emotionless. Listing opened 0902, escrow at 0927, seller misrepresented sole ownership, Clause 17C violated, fraud confirmed by notarized records, buyer withdrew after disclosure. We have affidavits from 2 witnesses, a letter of testamentary intent, and police documentation regarding the defendant's intoxicated disturbance. Each receipt was laid on the table. The addendum, the agent affidavit, the police report, the life estate letter, the will excerpt, the certified statements. Paper, ink, truth. Richard tried to interrupt, but Davies raised a hand. You'll have your turn. When she finished reviewing the evidence, the room went silent. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. Then Davies looked at Richard. Mr. Stone, the evidence is overwhelming. Your options are a plea with restitution and probation or a full trial, where this becomes a felony fraud case. I strongly recommend the first. He shifted in his seat, jaw twitching. I was trying to take care of family, he muttered. Davies leaned forward slightly. Families are not exempt from the law. My mother's eyes filled. For the first time, she didn't speak to defend him. She just whispered, I didn't know. I believed her. But knowledge and accountability aren't twins. Silence can be guilt wearing a softer face. Richard finally nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Fine. Plea. Whatever it takes. Davies marked it down. The sound of the pen scratching the paper felt final. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Laura turned to me. You won, she said quietly. I shook my head. No, we upheld something. That's better. Back at the cabin weeks later, I stood on the porch at dawn. The mountains rose like sentinels. The air smelled of pine and frost, same as when I was a kid. The house was quiet, solid, mine again. Not because of vengeance, but because of order restored. I thought of my father's letter. Stronghold of peace. He hadn't meant a building. He'd meant a way of standing. I looked at the horizon and smiled faintly. Quiet doesn't mean weak, I said out loud, just to hear it in the open air. Then I turned to the camera, steady, composed. Have you ever seen someone underestimated? Until the truth spoke louder than revenge? If you have, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who believes discipline still matters. Soldier Revenge brings you new stories every day. The wind moved through the trees like an answer. Mission complete.